You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Matt Bailey hosts a fantastic podcast called The Endless Coffee Cup. Matt, tell these fine folks what they'll get when they listen.
At Endless Coffee Cup, we go beyond the headlines with a regular discussion of marketing news, media, and culture about our complex digital lifestyle. Of course, with my emphasis on education, I have great guests from all over the world that share their stories, giving listeners unique insights into their experiences and expertise.
Sounds super useful. Where can people subscribe?
They can go to my website at sitelogic.com or find the show at marketingpodcast.net. Or hey, we're everywhere, wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard him. Go subscribe.
Entrepreneurs Enigma is a podcast for the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. So the wins and the fails that we all face being entrepreneurs, how we learn from adversity. Every week I talk to a different entrepreneur with a story to tell. I'm Seth Goldstein. Come with me on the journey. This is Entrepreneurs Enigma. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Entrepreneurs Enigma podcast. I'm Seth. Today I am here with the OG of digital marketing. I mean, he was back in digital marketing, I think when I was in diapers, but I was in high school. Not to make you feel really old. I mean, yeah, I have more gray hair than he does, so go figure. But I'm here with Matt Bailey of Site Logic and Endless Coffee Cup podcast. I think you have a tagline now for that, don't you?
Yeah, I think it is. It is digital marketing caffeinated.
Oh, it's definitely caffeinated.
Yeah,
Get
definitely
Matt
caffeinated.
going with a guest on his show. It's like an hour and a half podcast. So get you going. It just goes and goes and goes. You can't
Yeah.
stop listening though, which is the
well,
thing.
Thank you.
So I
Yeah, I
alluded to the
appreciate it.
fact that Matt is an OG of digital marketing. You started Site Logic or some version of Site Logic back in the 90s, didn't you?
Well, that was my first, I would say, professional foray into website development, which led into search engine optimization, which led into analytics, which led into paid search. You know, you
It
hit
grows on
those
you, yeah.
dominoes, right? Well, I got to learn that, and you just keep building on that. But yeah, I was building websites for a commercial real estate firm.
Oh
And
wow.
it
That's
was
a
just,
niche.
and then I started my own because I was selling properties as well. And it was just an incredible learning experience. And even to this day, I learned lessons back then about analytics, about, asking the right questions about what am I tracking and is it the right thing to track? And that just set the stage for everything I've done since.
So you are actually a veteran. And actually, I say actually a veteran. That's not exactly nice, but you are a veteran.
Yes.
So thank you for
yes.
your service.
Thank you.
And so you did that back in the 90s, right? Before you got into the web, or is it after the web?
I
for you?
I started that in the late 80s. So yeah,
Oh, so you
yes.
jumped out, went did that. Then you got all technologically geeky in the 90s. I mean, you couldn't really. I mean, you guess you could get geeky in the 80s, but it's more BBSs.
Well, that's my claim to fame is the way I learned about all this stuff is my dad went out on his own back in the mid 80s, came home with a Commodore 64 so that he could do mail merge.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he was doing mailings and all kinds of stuff. And so I started clowning around with the 64. Next thing you know, a friend of mine, we went over to Radio Shack and we got a modem and the phone cradle and just started playing around, learning about BBSs and the Usenet, just amazing things. And so that's what triggered just, I love this world. It is so
It's
much
wild.
fun.
It's the first metaverse, really. It really is
Right.
metaverse 1.0.
Yeah.
Like Mark Zuckerberg thinks like, oh, I'm creating the metaverse. No, it was there already. It wasn't immersive as it was on the screen and it was
Right.
text based for a lot of it. But that was the first like alternate universe that we kind of tapped into.
Well, it was the interactions, I think, were so much more genuine than what we have today.
Oh, that's so surfacey now. Yeah.
And being on, especially in the search engine industry around the early 2000s, most of the information was transferred on forums.
Yeah.
And you'd
I
have
love forums.
debates, you'd have arguments, but the thing
You had
was,
to read. You'd have to
right,
read.
you would read, someone would create a 10 paragraph here's what I think Google's doing, and just go down. And then you would read through it and you would copy it and you would just go through like line by line. And then you would add more paragraphs to it. Yeah, it was a very reasoned, very methodological
sometimes reasoned,
approach.
sometimes we get a little fiery.
I will say there were the flame wars, that erupted. But
it was not good for us with ADHD, because you look at that and you're like, that guy wrote a book, and I'm like, I can't read that thing. So I literally I went back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. I would print out what the person read and use a highlighter to read the points I want. Like I couldn't read it on the screen. I've gotten better with it because you've had to, but like, man, some of these tomes that these guys would write, these people would write. I can say guys, but these people would write, and oh my god,
right, yeah.
And now it's all on Twitter. Now it's like threads.
Well, and it's kind of one or two lines, and it's people reacting.
Yes.
And now I'll say the early forums weren't without their people just reacting, but it was, for the most part, it was people reacting with a counterpoint.
Yes.
With additional thought, with just as a research.
It's getting there with Twitter. It's getting now with the threads. People are expounding a little bit more on their thought process, but it's still a tweet. It's still
exactly.
Not as cool.
And it's so out of, if I'm going to read a long diatribe, I'm going to read it in a specific format.
Exactly. You can't teach old dogs new tricks, right? Exactly. So Matt, you started SiteLogic.
Yes.
Now, was it just you at first? I mean, I know you grew it into an agency.
Right. Yeah. So I had been in the brand side. After I was in the real estate business, I was like, I love this internet thing more than I love real estate. Yeah. So I went to I went to work for a couple of brands. Then I went to the agency side because I felt like, I really want to spread out. I want to, a lot more. Brands were interesting. I won't trade that experience because it gives me a good background as to the politics that go on.
Oh my God, politics,
yeah. But the agency side was just dynamic. It was fast, and it was, working with a lot of people. So I was at a traditional agency, then I was at a web development agency, and one of the things that happened was WordPress came out.
Yeah,
and right away I'm going to the management of this company saying, you need to, the days of a $70,000, $100,000 website are done.
Oh my God.
Because this is going to change everything. Yeah. And there was kind of a reaction to it, not a whole lot. But at that time I knew I started SiteLogic. I wanted nothing to do with development.
Yeah.
Because the development companies, they would finish a website and they wipe their hands clean and we're done.
Yeah. And they're getting a little better at that now.
Right. And we're on the marketing side. That's where stuff begins, is when it's done. Yeah. And then I can't lose that support. I need programming support. I need graphics support. I need all this because we're learning what wasn't created right the first time, and through testing. And so I felt it was a very arrogant way of doing web design that, well, we're done. It's never done. We just need to keep going, keep testing, and keep developing.
So I started SiteLogic. Media. That's what we do. We do the website and we keep going. We just keep going.
So I started SiteLogic just purely as marketing. I developed relationships with development companies, and we would partner together on these things. And it was me in my basement for probably about 6 months. And then I started bringing along people, and they were just absolutely amazing. I look back, and one of them now is VP at a brand. Another one is, I think she's moving up to a VP position.
Wow. So you can say you knew them when, and you got to get their start, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
Makes you feel old, doesn't it?
Especially, they've grown up and had a family, and it was just, it's great to look back and just think about the people that have come through our lives. It's absolutely amazing.
We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and get right back to the show.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The VIQ Project. Carrie, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Okay, you know how you go to shoot a 2-minute video, except it takes 2 hours, you hate yourself on camera, you don't know what to do with it, and so it doesn't perform? You'll get all the tips and tricks you need to fix all of that on this podcast.
Wow, we're going to be lining up for this. Where can people subscribe?
You can find it on my website, which is carriebarrett.com. You can also find it if you search the VIQ Project Podcast on YouTube. Of course, you can find the show at marketingpodcasts.net, or you can subscribe and search for the VIQ Project Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Yeah, so now Site Logic has now pivoted. And then whenever
Yes.
I say the word pivot, I think of Ross and whoever else was in Friends with the couch going up the stairs. That really dates me here. But pivot. But you pivoted more to training and teaching, which
Yes.
you're a really good teacher. I mean, like you explain things well, which is good.
Thank you. Yeah, from the feedback that I get from people, that is, I would say, probably the foundation of what makes me successful as a trainer or teacher is taking these. I mean, you know how complicated this whole thing can get. And
Yes.
even if you go down a specialty like SEO, you're in the weeds really fast. So how do you explain it within a minute or less to a
Yeah.
business owner in a way that not only they comprehend, but that they can say, oh yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
That's really where we're shooting for. And yeah, I had been doing training even when I had the agency, and it got to the point where I needed to make a decision one way or the other,
Or you
what I'm
would have
going
been
to
too
do.
busy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the training aspect. I had a blast training the people that were working for me.
Yeah.
That was part of the fun. But then leaving, going back on my own, back in the basement,
Yeah.
and starting over, it was a very interesting time.
Yeah.
My wife and I had to learn how to work together at home. That was that was part of the fun.
Yeah. Fun. You say fun. You're being nice. You're being very diplomatic here. I'm sure there's ups and downs. And honey, you're talking too loud. I'm on the phone.
Yeah. Turn off the dryer. I got a call.
Oh, exactly. Or like, can you switch to laundry? Actually, my wife and I work in the same house together, and I'm in the basement next to the dryer. Luckily, good microphone. And I'll hear beep, boop, 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 boop. And I'm like, she's not going to hear it upstairs. All right, I'll get that after. I'll get that after I'm done my call. Like,
Right.
mental note. Laundry after call. I'm like, that's entrepreneurship right there. Do the laundry while you're
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Having
here's
a
a
cat
question
walk
for
in
you.
front of your screen, whatever.
working. Exactly. Oh, that's the best. So
Yeah.
here's a question for you. What's the best thing about being an entrepreneur versus being in-house?
I have better job security.
Really?
That's my response. I have better
How
job
so?
security as an entrepreneur. Here's a great example. I'm going for a loan for a house. Okay.
Okay.
Well, people that worked for me, they were buying houses, and all they needed to show was their W-2.
Yeah.
And I've got a regular job, and they got approved easy, like within a week or something.
Yeah.
I go as the owner of the company, and I've got to start producing amazing amounts of
Like
paperwork and
P&Ls, yeah.
documentation and all that to show that I'm not going to go out of business. And I felt like saying, you just gave loans to 3 people that if things go bad, I still get a check.
Yeah.
It won't. It just, and having gone through 2 economic downturns where I lost my
Yeah.
job because of the cutbacks,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I feel safer, more secure. I am in more control of my own destiny than if I were working for another company. And that's what
Wow.
I absolutely love about being an entrepreneur.
I love it. So what's the scariest? What keeps you up at night?
Keeps me up at night. Well, being an entrepreneur, Seth, you know that.
Exactly. I love how the
know,
best thing and the worst thing are usually the same exact things.
yeah, there are times where you're kind of wondering, well, where's the next client coming from? Where's the next check
God,
coming
yeah.
from? And that's the big question. And that's the thing. If you're all alone, you got to do
Yeah.
all this work on yourself. And then when do you start farming it out? How much do you do? Finding, I will say that elusive balance
Oh,
is
God,
probably
yeah.
the hardest thing to find.
Mhm.
When you do, it's nirvana. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
When it's rock and rolling. So what's the most important thing to carry with you all the time?
You mean physically or
It can be
like
either.
in my brain?
It can be. You can go really deep. You can go really surfacey. Whatever you want to do.
Wow. Most important thing to carry with me. I mean, it's my phone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everything.
I'll say that is the first answer. I would say the first, what I would attribute, going back 30 years, what
Mhm.
I would attribute a lot of my success to is networking and
Okay.
getting to know people.
Mhm.
Um, there are a lot of opportunities I received because I took the time to get to know people, to network with them, to
Mhm.
really, how can I help you in
Yeah.
building a relationship? And those relationships, I'm not building them because they might pay off. The
Yeah.
payoff is that's icing.
Yeah.
Um, but I look back and it's so many opportunities were because I knew people. And, when I started Site Logic, it was one of those things where, I had left another company and I still had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't
Mm.
know. Am I going to go work for someone? Am I going to start up? Um, as soon as I, as soon as I realized, okay, I'm going to start my own thing, send an
Yeah.
email out to all my friends in the industry,
Yeah.
and two of them got back that day and said, I've got a little too much going on right now. How about you take this? I mean, that right
That's how it
there,
goes.
it
Yeah.
it all comes down to your attitude. It all comes down to how you treat
Mhm.
people. It all
Yeah.
comes down to the value you put into the relationships you have. I would have never been able to start like that if it weren't for, the trust and the
Mhm.
relationships that I had with others in the industry.
It's so important, and people don't realize that networking it's
Oh,
as much as it's an extroverted kind of activity, it's worth its weight in gold. I'm trying to teach my
absolutely.
wife how to network now because she's all on her own. And I'm like, all right, you gotta not be as much of an introvert. And she's like, well, that's your job. I'm like, hon, you just gotta go out and like connect and meet people. And she's like, oh,
Yeah, I've got a daughter. She's starting her business. She's an entrepreneur. She's an
ooh,
artist though.
yeah,
When with a dad as a marketer and she's an artist, and I'm like, I'm looking at some of the stuff she's making. I'm like, okay, you need to make 100 of these. And all of a sudden, I've turned her into a machine, and she's looking at me like, Dad, just back off. I make it because I like it. I'm not going to turn around and make thousands of
she's a
these.
Z though. That's what it is. I mean, that's the total. But as much as I don't like the generational thing of being a millennial and having people bash the millennials, I mean, even you're an Xer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Xers got a bad rap from the boomers. You guys give us a bad rap, and then the Zs. Oh God, the Zs.
Us
Just
Xers, we're in the corner watching everything go down. No one talks
you're
about
just
the Xers.
laughing. You're like, ha
I
ha
know,
ha.
yeah. We're just sitting back laughing, going, you guys go at it. We'll sit here and just
Yeah, because the
watch it all
millennials are
burn
dealing
down.
with their offspring that are now Zs,
Yeah, right,
and
right.
and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah,
brilliant. Don't get me wrong, but it's really funny how every like segment of generations, there's a whole different mentality shift. Like I thought we were out of left field when we were millennials. Cause I mean, being a marketer, I was studying my own generation, and I'm an elder millennial. I'm a
hmm
geriatric millennial. I'm 1 year into millennial. Otherwise I'm a baby Xer, and so I'm looking at the younger millennials. I'm like, because you look at the top of the millennials and the bottom of the millennials, completely different. Oh my God, my designer is a baby
yeah,
millennial, and her whole mindset's completely different from mine. I'm
yep.
borderline X mentality.
I think a lot of it has to do with and I call it the great experiment of 2012. That's
Yeah,
where the confluence of our mobile, our
yeah,
phone, internet, and social media are all on one device,
yeah.
and
I
nobody
used to, I,
got
used,
an
I, I fought that. I used to have
yeah.
my Palm Pilot
I
and my phone, and I
had the BlackBerry.
swore I was
Yeah,
never gonna have not one device. I was like,
yeah,
I can't trust it. I can't trust it. But
yeah.
no, I have one phone. I have a
So
tablet, but that's besides the
yeah,
point.
we give everyone this technology and no instruction book, and
Yeah,
and we're seeing the results of this. Everyone's
yeah,
kind of had to figure it out for themselves. Some went all in, some don't trust it, and we've got all these things. So I think that the generational differences have been magnified by
yeah,
the technology, but I also think that the generational differences are largely stage of life.
yeah.
I'll never forget there was a Super Bowl commercial years ago, and it's a guy out with his friends. He's like, I don't need anybody. Next scene, he's with a girl. And he's like, oh, we're just friends. We're not, there's nothing serious. Next thing, he's at the altar. And then the next scene, they're at a table and they see another family with crying kids. And they're like, we're never having kids.
And then
Next
next,
scene, they're at the hospital, and it moves on. And like, I'm
yeah,
never going to have a minivan. I'm never gonna, and
I've
finally,
avoided that though, thankfully.
and
I
then
only, I only have one. You have 4 kids, so it's
I
different,
have 4
right? You have
daughters, Seth. I have
4
4
daughters. Yeah,
daughters.
but you have activities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like, so you need the minivan. I have 1 kid and a dog, so we could get away with a small SUV.
Oh man, that's good for you. Good for you.
We
Yeah,
avoid the minivan.
I'm trying to tell my wife it's time to give up the minivan.
But the minivans are actually pretty cool now. I mean, they're very high tech.
It comes in handy. It comes in so handy. Yeah.
You just kind of suck up your pride. That's when like the suburban attack vehicles came into play. You want the minivan without the minivan, without the van part.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I've got my car, and that becomes when it's just a couple of us, we'll take my car.
You don't need easier parallel park.
Yes.
The things are big. So anyhow, so Matt, where can people find you online? What's your main watering hole?
All right. The primary place is sitelogic.com. That is SITE, as in website. So sitelogic.com. From there, you can find the podcasts. They're listed there. Obviously, Endless Coffee Cup is on just about every podcast platform that's out there.
Yeah.
And then also I have a training and education site. The classes are listed on SiteLogic, but if you want to look at that, it is learn.sitelogic.com.
How creative.
And so, the website's kind of the central area to find everything.
And then, I mean, with social media wise, are you mostly on LinkedIn, Twitter?
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn, baby.
Yeah.
That is.
LinkedIn's so good for business. I love it. So.
Yep. Yeah. So on LinkedIn, it's Matt Bailey, SiteLogic.
Oh, there you go. Mine is Goldstein Media, and I'm terrified to change it because everywhere it's Goldstein Media, but that's my personal page. And I'm like,
right. I know. And mine is so I'm connected to my brand. I can't change it at all.
I am my brand.
And the person who has Matt Bailey hasn't updated it since 2013 or something. So
yeah, I have that problem. I have a much more famous Seth Goldstein out in Silicon Valley, and we fight over usernames constantly. So that's
great.
It's hilarious. So. Matt, this has been so much fun. Thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you, Seth. I appreciate the invitation. Great conversation.
Yeah, anytime, and go drink your coffee.
That was a great show. Hey, if you're enjoying Entrepreneurs Enigma, please give us a review on the podcast directory of your choice. We're on all of them. And these reviews really help others find the show. Also, if you're getting value from the show and want to buy me a coffee, go to the show notes and click on the link to help me stay awake while I bring you more great episodes to your ears. That's in the show notes, and I look forward to the next episode. Take care, guys. Goldstein Media hopes you have enjoyed this episode.
This podcast is one of the many great shows on the MPN Marketing Podcast Network.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christopher Hines hosts a great podcast called Pod Central. Chris, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
We help you launch, grow, or monetize your podcast. We even help those podcast business owners out there grow their agencies and get more clients. This is a place where you come to learn everything podcasting.
Wow. Where can people subscribe?
Search for the podcast wherever you listen to your shows, or find me on Twitter at Chris Podcasting, and I can send it to you directly.
Or go to marketingpodcasts.net. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.